Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a theory that's, well, it's pretty radical. It's an attempt to describe literally everything, from the cold, hard laws of physics to the messy world of human emotions, all using a single, unified framework.
So let's just start with a really provocative idea. What if all those big, abstract concepts we feel and argue about, things like justice, mercy, even peace itself, what if they weren't just philosophical ideals? What if they were actual variables in some kind of universal mathematical system?
Okay, so the first piece of this whole puzzle is a framework they're calling the calculus of concepts. And the core idea here is that our thoughts, our virtues, our emotions, they're not random. They actually exist in a structured system that, surprisingly, seems to follow mathematical rules.
Now, at the heart of this calculus are these things called conceptual primes. The best way to think about them is like the primary colors of our thoughts. They're the basic, can't be broken down any further concepts. Justice, mercy, power, patience. These are the building blocks we use to create all of our more complicated ideas and feelings.
And here's where it gets really interesting. You can actually manipulate these primes just like numbers in an equation. You can combine them, you can remove them. For example, if you combine justice and mercy, their synthesis gives you peace. Makes sense, right? But if you take the concept of power and you remove humility from it, what's left? Tyranny. It's almost like a new language for describing the human condition.
And this language can get incredibly deep. Just look at this theorem of wisdom. It suggests that knowledge, when it's tempered or, divided by pride, which really means knowledge combined with humility, and then you add empathy to that mix, that's what gives you true wisdom. It's a really elegant way to frame a pretty profound idea. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. We're going to go from our own minds out to the nature of reality itself. This theory says there are two fundamentally different ways to think about order in the universe. And, well, we humans tend to get them mixed up.
So on the left, you've got what's called relativistic entropy. That's our human perception of order. To you and me, a whole unbroken glass is ordered, right? It's low entropy. But then there's absolute entropy. And from the universe's point of view, the rules are totally different. A shattered glass on the floor is actually a more stable, lower energy state. And here's the radical part. This theory claims that physical stability is the true measure of order, which means the shattered glass is actually the lower entropy state. It's completely the opposite of how we usually think about it.
And that's the key takeaway right there. Our idea of order is totally relative to us. It's conceptual. But the universe, it couldn't care less about our concepts. It's driven by physics, and it's always moving toward the most stable physical state it can find, even if that state looks like complete and utter chaos to our eyes. So this brings us right to the core of the whole thing. It's a theory called the First Quanta, and it's this incredibly bold attempt to unite those two different worlds, the internal world of our concepts and the external world of fundamental physics. What it claims is that reality actually has a dual nature. It's operating as two different systems at the exact same time. On one hand, it's a physical system, always trying to find the most energy-efficient path, what physicists call the path of least action. And on the other hand, it's an information system, always trying to find a state of maximum order, which means minimum entropy.
And this whole dual nature idea is captured in what's called a master equation. And this equation has two forms that are basically equivalent. The physics form uses the language of classical mechanics, stuff like motion and energy. The information form uses the language of, information theory, to talk about order and entropy. The theory says they are just two sides of the very same coin.
And that right there is probably the most powerful claim in this whole theory, that the universe's physical drive to find the easiest path is identical to its informational drive to find its most ordered state. They're not two different forces pushing and pulling. They are just two different languages describing the exact same fundamental process of nature trying to find stability.
Now that is a beautiful, really elegant idea, for sure. But does it actually match up with the real world? Because at the end of the day, the real test for any physical theory is whether or not it can make accurate predictions.
So here was the big challenge. Using only the basic rules of the First Quanta, could you run a simulation that predicts the exact temperatures at which different materials change their state, when they actually melt or boil in the real world?
And the results were, they were just astounding. This number you're looking at, that's the accuracy of the theory's prediction for the melting point of lead. The simulation, built entirely from these first principles, was right to within a tiny fraction of a percent.
And it wasn't just a fluke with lead, not at all. I mean, look at this data. We're talking about a huge range of materials here, from cryogenic nitrogen that boils at just 77 Kelvin, all the way up to aluminum that melts at over 900 Kelvin. And in pretty much every single case, the theory's predictions were over 99.8% accurate. That's just incredible.
So let's bring this all the way back around. We started with a calculus for human ideas, and we ended up in the world of quantum physics. So what does this all mean for how we understand reality?
This is the grand unification moment. The theory is proposing that the fundamental drive for order that so precisely predicts the melting point of lead is the exact same principle that gives structure to our abstract thoughts. That those equations for wisdom and peace, maybe they aren't just metaphors. Maybe they're descriptions of this same universal process.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty mind-bending thought. If everything, from the way molecules behave to the very nature of mercy, can all be described by one single informational drive towards stability and order, what does that say about our own consciousness, about our thoughts, and what is our place inside that grand cosmic equation?